Good afternoon, it's October 12th, 2024. We're not critiquing the news in this video. Instead, we're having a look at social media. This is the platform formerly known as Twitter, now called X. The account holder is at Peter Dutton _MP, Australia's alternate Prime Minister in this socialist-controlled country of Australia. Now, the left-wing mainstream corporate media aren't talking about it much, but the Labor Liberal Uni Party is working hard to extinguish free speech here in Australia. The absolute right to free speech is the foundation that all other human rights are built on. Without free speech, you have no way of defending your other rights. Tyrannical governments throughout history have always extinguished free speech first before attacking their own citizens and stripping them of their other rights, including their right to live. If you needed proof that the left-wing mainstream corporate media is completely controlled by the same shadowy group who control the Uni Party, their relative silence on the misinformation and disinformation bill is it. If they were legitimate news organisations, they'd be endlessly and angrily decrying this unneeded and asked for attack on our fundamental and most essential human right. And for people who listen to their videos, what Peter Dutton is saying here is government or bureaucrats shouldn't decide what's true or false. That's why we are standing firm against Labor's misinformation bill. Every Australian has the right to free speech. The Coalition will continue to protect open discussion and debate, which are essential to our democracy. What a lot of guff. Okay, let's just visit this bill. Its actual name, if you want to look it up on the aph.gov.au site, is Communications Legislation Amendment, in brackets, Combating Misinformation and Disinformation, Bill 2024. Let's start with the definitions. Over here, we have the definition of disinformation, and it has the meaning given by subclause 13.2, and misinformation has the meaning given by subclause 13.1. But there is no definition for harm, which will become significant later. So if we go across to the actual clause 13.1 and 13.2, and again, I'll read this for the people that listen to the videos. For the purpose of this schedule, dissemination of content using a digital service is misinformation on the digital service if A, the content contains information that is reasonably verifiable as false, misleading, or deceptive, and B, the content is provided on the digital service to one or more end users in Australia, and C, the provision of the content on the digital service is reasonably likely to cause or contribute to serious harm. And D, the dissemination is not excluded dissemination. Excluded dissemination, of course, is things that political parties say or that the controlled left-wing mainstream corporate media says. So, okay, all right, let's just quickly visit the meaning of disinformation. Clause 2. For the purpose of this schedule, dissemination of content using a digital service is disinformation on the digital service if, well, it looks very similar, the content contains information that is reasonably verifiable as false, misleading, or deceptive, and the content is provided on the digital service to one or more end users in Australia, and the provision of the content on the digital service is reasonably likely to cause or contribute to serious harm, and D, the dissemination is not excluded dissemination, and there's an extra bit, and E, either 1, there are grounds to suspect that the person disseminating or causing the dissemination of the content intends that the content deceive another person, or 2, the dissemination involves inauthentic behaviour. All right, so what does all this mean? Reasonably verifiable. If you look at what the lefties believe in, they believe things like CO2 can cause global warming, and they have got lots and lots of websites that can verify this. However, the basic laws of physics prove that CO2 can't trap heat, and therefore all their left-wing academics, all their PhDs that have been trained and indoctrinated in this absolute nonsense, whose whole income and career and credibility and social life and everything else, their whole world rotates around maintaining this belief set that's not based in physics, then of course they can verify actual misinformation and say that that's truth, and that someone like me, who can call it out from first principles physics, is guilty of an offence under this Act, which includes 12 months jail. And of course, the disinformation side of it is disseminating information that there's intent there. So instead of inadvertently believing something that's not true and repeating that, you know it's not true and you're repeating that. And I don't know what the test is to determine whether you know it or whether you know it's true or whether you know it's not true. That seems to involve an act of mind reading or something like that. But either way, it's a very dangerous decision that's being taken here, that somebody in the bureaucracy or in the government itself can decide what's truth and what's not. Okay, so let's just jump across to my favourite online dictionary and see what it says about harm. So harm is physical or psychological damage or injury. Physical or psychological damage. Well, some of the lefties out there can be psychologically damaged if you say something to them like, a man can't transition to become a woman and have a baby. And that's a biological fact. But if you repeat that biological fact to a lefty, they'll regard it as misinformation or disinformation, depending on your intent in transmitting that information, and they'll sustain a psychological injury from it because they believe things that just aren't true. Now, let's consider that the Labor and the Liberal parties are one organisation, pretending to be two, to give voters the illusion of choice. And let's remember that they both want to silence you. So while the Liberals introduced and then later withdrew very similar laws, in doing so, they created the needed space for Labor to do its work in. So let's just visit real quick the Liberals website, and this is their Protecting Australians online section. And in part 9.9, they've got fighting fake news, and down the bottom we've got these words: a re-elected coalition government will introduce new laws to provide the Australian Communication and Media Authority with stronger enforcement and information gathering powers to hold big tech companies to account for harmful disinformation and misinformation online. Yep, that's right. And if we jump across to the Labor Party's national platform, at part 29, we find that Labor will provide a strong regulatory framework to address misinformation and disinformation, as well as support the media literacy of citizens and consumers. So misinformation and disinformation have always been used as a weapon in human conflict, and the only proven defence against them is counter-speech. Only more speech can counter misinformation and disinformation. Less speech allows whoever has the power to censor others to win. And those who seek that power always harbour ill intentions towards others. Personally, I find the endless misinformation and disinformation from the Labor, Liberals and Greens parties deeply offensive, because they're seeking to harm others and enrich themselves by lying, particularly about climate, energy and viruses. However, I'd never try to silence them, because in delivering their misinformation and disinformation, they expose themselves over time as the liars they are. For example, they've been saying since 1982 that man-made CO2 was going to cause catastrophic global warming, and that was going to cause the seas to rise. And of course, there's been no such sea level rise. And now everybody with the tiniest modicum of common sense can go to a beach that they visited as a kid, where there's familiar landmarks that don't erode over time, such as rocks, and they'll find that at high tide it'll be exactly as they remember it from when they were a child. That's why I call these lunatics out in every free speech media platform that I engage with. And the most free these days are X and Rumble. And of course, there's one local newspaper left in my area, The Express, based in Mareeba. I still write letters to the editor there that are published without censorship that contain these sort of truths, and it drives the local lefties insane. Now, at no time in history have those who wish to silence others been the good guys, which is why we need to get the Labor Liberal Uni Party out of our parliaments.